This is the lecture for chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3 reviews prefixes and their use and just some of the common prefixes. Remember, a prefix is a word element that's located at the beginning of a word, and changing a prefix can change the meaning of the entire word. So there's various prefix types. Position, which describes a place or location. Also, number or measurement. These describe an amount, size, or degree of involvement. And direction. These types indicate a pathway or a route. So I'll just go over some of the commonly used prefixes. First of all, positional prefixes. So these describe the location of something. An example using this very first one, epi, would be epigastric. So epigastric means above the stomach. Prefixes describing number or measurement are listed here. So by means two, macro and micro, these mean large and small. Prefixes of direction, these are describing directions, so outside or inside, within. The first two are opposites of each other. Ab is from, ad is toward. So abduction is movement of a body part away from the body. Adduction is movement of a body part toward the body. And then lastly, just some other commonly used prefixes. Whenever you see a word that starts with A or AN, it means without or not having. So an example would be anoxia. That means without oxygen. So chapter 4 covers a lot of information regarding body structures. There are 5 levels of organization within the body, starting with smallest to largest. There are cells, tissues, organs, systems, and organisms, which is an entire living person. So I'll start with a cell. It's the smallest unit of all living things. And here's a typical cell cut open, and you can see some of the components here. All cells have 3 major components: a cell membrane, which acts as a barrier that surrounds the cell; cytoplasm, which is all of the contents within the cell. So it's everything you see here, all of these structures called organelles within the cell. They each have a specific function that they perform. And then also a nucleus, which is one of these organelles. It's found within all cells, and it contains the DNA of the cell. A tissue is a group of cells that has a common function. And histology is the study of tissues. There's 4 major tissue types: epithelial tissue, and you can see typically what it does, where it's located. Epithelial tissue forms the covering of your body. So your skin is an epithelial tissue. Connective tissue supports, protects, and binds other tissues together. It's the most abundant type of tissue. Nervous tissue detects and responds appropriately to maintain normal body functions. So it detects any kind of stimuli or changes, and then it responds. And muscle tissue contracts to cause movement. These are pictures of the 4 different tissue types. An organ is a group of tissues that performs a specific function. And a system, or an organ system, is composed of related organs that have a common function. And then finally, an organism is any living individual. So we'll go through some of the terms that describe areas of the body. And we'll start with just what anatomical position is. This is the standard position used to allow for accurate anatomical study. And it's always the same. It always involves an individual standing upright, facing forward, arms at their sides, palms forward, legs together, feet are flat on the floor, and toes are pointing forward. So I'll go through some of the common directional terms. I'm going to go through pretty quickly. So there's anterior and posterior. Anterior means toward the front of the body. Posterior means toward the back of the body. Superior and inferior. Superior means toward the head or above or towards the top. And inferior means away from the head or below. There's medial and lateral. Medial means toward the midline, which is an imaginary line that goes through the middle of the body. And lateral means away from the midline, off toward the side of the body. So there are a few others, but these are the most commonly used ones that you'll see. Planes of the body, these are imaginary flat surfaces that pass through the body. A mid-sagittal plane is right here. It's a vertical plane that lies directly along the midline and divides the body into equal right and left halves. A frontal or coronal plane is also a vertical plane, but it divides the body into anterior and posterior parts. And then a transverse plane is a horizontal plane, and it divides the body into superior and inferior parts. Okay, now major body cavities. There are two major body cavities, the dorsal cavity, which is toward the back of the body, and the ventral cavity, located toward the front. The dorsal cavity has two subdivisions, the cranial cavity and the spinal cavity, back here, also known as the vertebral cavity. The ventral cavity is here, it's a little bit larger, and it also contains two subdivisions, the thoracic cavity, so that's located above the diaphragm. It contains the lungs and the heart. And the abdominopelvic cavity, which is located below the diaphragm. And it is separated into two more subdivisions. The abdominal cavity contains a lot of the digestive organs like the stomach, the liver. And the pelvic cavity all the way down here contains the bladder and reproductive structures. Okay. Regions of the spine. So the spine is composed of 26 vertebrae or irregular bones that extend from the base of the skull down to the pelvis. And it's divided into sections. The cervical section contains cervical vertebra, it's in the neck. The thoracic section is located in the chest area. The lumbar area is in the lower back, so it's even further down. Sacral is also lower back, and coccyx is the tailbone. All right, and lastly, some important word elements that are related to body structures. So there are a lot that are listed here, and you don't need me to read off all these. You can read these elements and their definitions right here. Here are some more. A lot of these are referring to major organs, like hepat or hepato refers to the liver. You can see bones, cartilage, muscle. Okay, here's some more. These are terms that are referring to actually different colors. So I'll give you an example. Leukocyte is a white cell. All right, so a little bit about pathology. The body requires the maintenance of a stable internal environment, and that's called homeostasis, just the maintenance of a stable internal environment. And the body requires that for survival. Maintaining homeostasis involves having a constant supply of oxygen and nutrients for all cells. Additionally, it involves maintaining an ideal temperature, ideal amount of water within and outside of your cells, pH, and also salt concentration. And these are very, very closely monitored because they need to stay within a very specific range. Disease results from the disruption of homeostasis, causing cells, tissues, and organs to behave abnormally. Diseases often present a group of signs, symptoms, and clinical findings. And a lot of times we use the terms signs and symptoms interchangeably, but they should not be used this way. They are different. Signs are objective indicators that are observable. So somebody that's not you can look at you and see these things like a rash or inflammation, swelling. Symptoms are subjective indicators reported by the patient. So these are things that cannot be seen by another observer. These are things that the patient feels, like pain or nausea. Clinical findings are the results of medical procedures like lab tests and x-rays that are performed on the patient. A diagnosis is establishing a cause of the disease, and the term idiopathic means that the cause is unknown. And the prognosis is the prediction of the course of a disease and its probable outcome. So I have a series of diseases and conditions. These are described within your textbook on pages 59 and 60, but I'll go through some of these myself and just give you quick definitions. An adhesion, which is shown here on the PowerPoint, is an abnormal fibrous band that holds tissues together. And these are tissues that normally should be separated. Edema is an abnormal accumulation of fluid. Febrile means related to fever. Gangrene is tissue death, and that's usually caused by an obstruction in the circulatory system or by trauma. A hernia is protrusion of an organ through the structure or membrane that normally contains it. Inflammation is a general body defense against injury. So it's a natural reaction to any kind of injury, like a cut or a burn. Next one is mycosis. This is a fungal infection. Perforation is a hole that penetrates a structure. Rupture is the break or bursting of a tissue or organ. And septicemia is a bacterial infection that spreads to the blood. Next are some medical and surgical procedures. An ablation is the removal of a body part through a procedure. And that procedure could be just simply surgery or freezing. Electrocauterization is tissue destruction through heat. Curettage is removal of tissue from a body cavity by scraping. Incision and drainage is removal of fluid from a tissue through an incision. Resection is removal of part or all of a structure or organ or tissue. A revision. This is a repeat procedure done to correct an undesirable result. So if a surgery was done and it wasn't done properly, or if, a part of the tissue that shouldn't be there was still remaining, a revision would have to be done to go back and perform the same procedure to correct an undesirable result. Endoscopy is a visual examination of a cavity or canal using a specialized lighted camera. And a biopsy is removal of a tissue for microscopic inspection. Okay, and the last thing I'll go through are some testing, laboratory tests. Very commonly used one is blood chemistry analysis. That's evaluation of blood serum contents. Like, for example, this would tell you cholesterol levels. And a CBC is a complete blood count. That's a test analyzing blood cell levels.